I honestly do feel like the overarching story, particularly in this trilogy, has been underappreciated. But obviously it's subjective. Like there's players like myself and Xavier that like love the story, and that's one of the things we love most about the trilogy. And then there's players that like don't care for it at all. They're just there to solve the puzzles. They're there to speedrun. They're there to do wall bangs, whatever. And then I think there's also players like yourself, Tim, that like do appreciate the story, but you're not as crazy about it as players like us.
That would be true, yes.
So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on the story. Like, do you...
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's not your favorite aspect of the game, but do you still appreciate it on some level?
I do. I just want to start off with, I think the story doesn't... Like, one of the first avenues that people learn about, okay, what should I appreciate about this game that's coming out is through game journalists' reviews of a game. And I think the problem with Hitman's story is that much of the story is not told in the cutscenes or not told through one or two playthroughs. It's told through the missions and overhearing conversations.
Yeah, that's
I think people that write reviews don't get the time. It's not their fault at all.
Right.
I think they're doing a great job reviewing the game, but they don't get the time to play through and understand the entire story. So often the story gets bad rep in the reviews because, there's not much in the cutscenes, right? And the cutscenes elevate as you learn more and more through the missions. So I appreciate the story the more I play each mission. Every time I play a Hitman game, I revert to, the story didn't interest me very much. And then as I play more and more, because I'm more interested in mechanics, but I like overhearing conversations. As I keep playing, the story intrigues me more and more, and I become far more invested in it. I think for me still, and this might be nostalgia talking, the older games' stories had a larger mystique to them. I guess I didn't really... Maybe because I didn't understand a lot about them, they drew me in a lot more, and I still don't really understand the full plots of some of the older games. But Codename 47 has a special place in my heart because of its... I like the idea of taking out all of your family, effectively. That was what the game was about. Yeah.
We can all identify with that at times, I think.
But, especially 47, because his family is not particularly... kind, I'd say. They're very they have a very interesting agenda. But I don't know, the more I play Hitman games, the more I appreciate the stories, which is far different from other games. And I was talking to one of the writers on Twitter about this once, where I said most games have lots of games have audio books and not audio books, what are they called? Audio logs and lore books you can read in the games, which deliver more of the plot, the story. But Hitman has figured out a solution to that sort of game stopping, now you're playing Skyrim or whatever, now you can read this book. And you just stop the gameplay to read the book. Hitman has figured out a way to have lots of lore and the story delivered through characters who are speaking next to you as you're sneaking around corners and waiting, and planning out your next move.
Absolutely.
And it's really figured out a way to deliver that plot without you having to stop the gameplay.
Yeah.
And I think that specifically is why I appreciate the plot and the story of Hitman a lot.
Yeah.
Is because even though I'm more of a mechanical player, I end up appreciating the story because I hear so much of it just by playing, which is incredibly well designed, especially in the new games. Massive kudos to IO for pulling that off. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
So I think that is what I appreciate the most. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think in our outline of the podcast discussion guide, we're going to try and touch on that more in more detail later. But I absolutely agree with the whole kind of, it's almost like the story's being told through various mediums. It's the sandbox storytelling versus the linear overarching storytelling in the cutscenes. It's not just the cutscenes telling the story, it's also all these countless characters that you can eavesdrop on, often just by chance, because they might be hidden in a little pocket of the level that you might, if you don't replay the map enough, you might not even ever encounter them. Yeah. But they share these really interesting and insightful snippets of dialogue that give a whole new layer to really, really important characters.
Absolutely.
the like in Hawke's Bay, for example, near the truck with the flares in the back that you can shoot as you make your escape. Yeah. There's some enforcers like digging some graves in the sand to bury the people that they murdered in the house.
Oh yeah.
And they share a little bit of dialogue about Lucas Gray working, because Lucas Gray's their boss, they're members of the private militia, and they have a quick conversation about Gray, how he was like the way he discovered Providence was because he was working as a head of security for Eugene Cobb, who was a high-ranking Providence operative who was a banker at the bank in New York. What's it called?
Morgan Yates and Co. Is that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
I think that's the law firm.
That's it. Yeah, that's the law firm.
The name of the bank, Fitzpatrick something.
Yates is Do
you recall the name
Milton
of the
Fitzpatrick.
bank? Melton Fitzpatrick. That's right. He's a high-ranking banker. Anyway, and like just little, and that just adds a whole layer or a huge chunk of the puzzle to that character's backstory. And there's very, very limited information shared in the main cutscenes about the backstories of characters. And if you don't happen to venture near those enforcers, you'll never get that piece of that character's backstory. And that's just one example. There's so many other examples of that spread throughout all the maps throughout the trilogy, and like 20 plus maps. So it's incredible storytelling. It's not just watching a few cutscenes. It's just...
It's you being in a world and learning through the different ways you play. It's like it rewards the way you're playing the game in different ways. It's rewarding that because different paths you take will teach you different things about the story.
Yeah.
It's very unique to Hitman and very few other games, I think.
Yeah. And I think IO have become incredibly, they're like masters of world building. Like I think the levels obviously, it's not just, as we keep saying, it's not just the cutscenes that craft the story. It's also the levels, because they're the setting. You can't have a good story without a setting or an imaginative backdrop. And that's what I'd like to touch on next, is the extraordinary lengths that IO go to craft these amazing backdrops and settings to this really, really cool story. And I know, Xavier, you love exploring the maps. You've helped me do research for at least one lore video I've made in the past. I remember you helped me do some research about the Delgados.
Yeah.
And
that was fun.
Xavier just helped me do background research of those characters, and he'd go into apartments in Mumbai and watch the news reels on televisions and stuff. There's all this hidden lore, in all these little pockets of all the levels. It's just amazing. Would you be able to share something, would you be able to elaborate on that at all, Xavier? Not that specific time, but just what you've got out of exploring the maps.
Well, actually, just to touch on that, I was actually going to mention, I felt like before I conducted that research, then I pretty much had all the information I needed for the Delgado cartel. And then I started researching and looking for information. And I was blown away by how much I had missed. Like how you said, if you just watch the television program, the news will come on and talk about, a previous incident that 47 was connected to, or a target that was recently killed off in the previous mission. And it just adds so much more to it. And it was just, I was just, oh, wow, there's so much more. And when I went to Colombia again, just eavesdropping on so much of the dialogue that's just done for just that one mission, and little breadcrumbs have been sprinkled. I feel till this day, I know this is not the last that we've seen of Hector Delgado, for sure. He is definitely going to make an appearance one day, because he is the last surviving Delgado at this time. And I don't believe his suicide is canon, because they mentioned him in a news briefing after that mission, saying that he's the sole survivor of the Delgado cartel right now, the last living family member. So it's just little things like that. And kind of giving you a little bit of a glimpse of, hey, that could be a possible target in the future. He could get his act together and actually maybe bring the Delgado cartel back into operation successfully, and maybe Agent 47 might have to take it down again in the future, which I love, because IO, I feel, has been doing that since the first game, just kind of like saying, you know what, we don't know if we're going to head that direction, but we're going to plant the seeds.
Yeah.
And I love all of that, and even in just little snippets of dialogue. But researching that in Colombia, the Delgado cartel, made me realize how much dialogue we probably still haven't even noticed after countless times of playing the games.
Yeah, absolutely. And more often than not, you're more focusing on the strategy that you're trying to develop, or, you're not even really paying attention to what people are saying in the background. So
I watched a video on YouTube the other day. It popped up, and it was Dahlia, and she was calling, I think it was Ezra Berg or something, on her phone, just like, can you check into this Tobias Reaper guy who showed up?
Yeah.
Like, I've never heard that before.
So cool. Really? Wow.
Yeah, that was so cool. There's all sorts of stuff like that.
She spoke to Ezra Berg, the target from Colorado.
I think so, yeah. I think it was Ezra,
yeah. You're correct. She's on the phone with Ezra Berg, who later on we meet in Colorado. And back then, you're just kind of like, who is this guy? If you listen to that, it was kind of like a foreshadowing of your next target.
Yeah,
eventually.
yeah. And that happens a lot, doesn't it? There's foreshadowing elements, like you've got...
Don Yates was foreshadowed a lot, I think.
When you actually
I know you could find like pamphlets to Haven Island throughout the course of the game, and like little advertisements of locations coming up.
Yeah. Like brochures of Haven Island appearing in New York and things like that.
Yeah.
And also red herrings, like Jin Po was talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Never a target, but you always thought he might be. Is you're like,
that's so true.
But no, he just plays into the larger narrative. Well, not necessarily a target. Yeah.
And one of the things I also love is just from the storytelling world building perspective, is just all the zany characters that they come up with, like Jason Portman, Florida Man, the hippie. There's just so many of them.
Yes.
And the fact that they can just like reappear in different maps, I love that.
Yeah, the hippie especially is everywhere.
Yeah. What was the name of Jordan Cross's band manager?
Barrett.
Was it Trixie
Yes.
Barrett or something?
Barrett. Dexy Barrett.
Dexy Barrett.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. The fact that she reappears in Mendoza, and have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Like, and the news reporter. The news
reporters are two people that you can walk between their camera.
Yeah, in the car park in Mendoza, the news reporter. That's the same news reporter that appears in Paris and also in Miami. Yeah. It's just like,
and Corvo Black mentioned previously, and there's all sorts. They go on forever.
Yeah, and this is just like a core element of the game that so many players just overlook, like that they don't make these subtle connections. Like, it's just astounding the amount of world building that IO have done, and just like on so many different levels, they've just interconnected these various maps on so many levels, like just with all the foreshadowing and the reoccurring characters and the little snippets of dialogue hinting to future events and red herrings. Like, it's just
so many games don't have it's hard to convince the people funding the games to be able to let you put in a bunch of stuff that may never be seen by most players. So the fact that IO could, especially when they were originally like tied to Square Enix, convince Square Enix to be like, okay, players might only play through the game once. Can we please put in like 1,000,000% more stuff than the players will ever see? And they're like, okay, sure. And that set the groundwork for the rest of the games. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hitman's like an iceberg. A lot of players only see the tip, but there's just so much submerged underneath that to be discovered.
Great metaphor.
Yeah, it's like
so true.
Yeah.